A conversation across the room in two different languages. So how many of you put down something like interest or relevance or fascination or intrigue or enthusiasm, curiosity? Okay. That's what I usually hear. Now, as it turns out, there has been a great deal of research on what leads people to take a deep approach to their learning. And if I were to summarize that research and what I'm hearing from you, it would be this. I want you to think about this and see if this captures what you've been thinking. That people are most likely to take a deep approach to their learning when they are trying to answer questions or solve problems that they, the learner, have come to regard as important, intriguing, or just beautiful. Does that capture what you were thinking? Yeah. I think it's what I hear from you. I think it's what I hear from the research. Now here's the problem. In a formal educational environment, the learner is usually not in charge of the questions. So we have a gap. We have a gap between those conditions which our own experience and the research tell us will lead to deep approaches to learning, and the conditions inherent in a formal educational environment. And how we fill that gap becomes extraordinarily important. I spent 15 years of my life out looking for people, teachers, who were extraordinarily good at filling that gap. But I want to put that question aside for just a moment and return to it in just a little bit. I want to ask you a second question. And that second question is important for teachers and for students. It is this. Why is it that so many students will predominantly take, I'm not talking about exclusively, but will predominantly take a surface approach to their learning, or a third approach that the literature began to identify by the 1980s. That third approach is usually called a strategic approach. So we have three types. We have the surface learner. The research tells us that surface learners are driven largely by fear and a desire simply to survive the class. Have you ever had a student who would say, or have you as a student ever said, if I could just get out of this course alive? That's a kind of surface approach. The research tells us that students who predominantly take a surface approach will decide that the easiest way to take that approach is simply to memorize. Try to memorize everything so they can spit it back on an examination. Then we have the strategic learner. Now, the strategic learner is driven by a desire for recognition, usually in the form of higher grades. And because they pursue grades almost exclusively, they often get them. And we celebrate their achievement. And often everyone is satisfied. They get high grades. But students who pursue just high grades have certain limitations. And the research makes that very clear. First, we know that these strategic students will not be risk takers. They will not follow their own curiosity for fear that pursuing something new might in fact jeopardize their grade average. So they're very limited, very circumspect in terms of what they pursue. They do not follow their own curiosity. They are not risk takers. But that's only the beginning. Second, we know from the research that people who predominantly take a strategic approach will tend to learn procedurally and not conceptually. They will learn to memorize formula and how to plug the right number into that formula. They will memorize data. They will memorize information. But often they have no conceptual understanding. And because they lack that conceptual understanding, they seldom become what the literature calls adaptive experts. Now, they may become routine experts, but not adaptive ones. You know the difference between the two? Routine experts, adaptive experts. A routine expert knows all the routines. You have this problem, this is what you do. You have this problem, this is what you do. You have this problem, this is what you do. They know the routines. The adaptive expert also knows those standard routines. But the adaptive expert also has something else. They have the ability to deal with problems that no one has ever solved before. They are adaptive. They welcome that opportunity to take on those unusual problems, and they're very good at taking them on, unlike the routine expert. So adaptive expertise is something special. And people who take that predominantly strategic approach to their learning, the research shows that they will seldom become adaptive experts. Now the problem is this. We need adaptive experts. Our world has too many problems that no one has ever solved before. Your country has problems that no one has ever solved before. My country has problems that no one has ever solved before. Life is changing rapidly. We are facing new kinds of problems at home and abroad. We need adaptive experts. But an education that fosters strategic learning will not produce that kind of expert. So my question is extraordinarily important. Why is it that so many of our students will predominantly take either a surface approach to their learning or a strategic approach to their learning, and not predominantly take a deep approach to their learning. Because it is only those who take that deep approach who are likely to become those adaptive experts. Now, over the last 35 or 40 years, there has been a huge body of research on that question. Much of that research has been done in Europe, in the United Kingdom, in Australia, in New Zealand. But some of it has been done in South America and in North America. And it applies to all of us. So what does that research tell us? It tells us that people take those approaches because they are conditioned to take those approaches. It's nothing natural in their brains. It's not in their personalities. It's not in their levels of intelligence. Some extraordinarily bright and capable people can predominantly take a strategic or surface approach to their learning. It is conditioning. And guess where much of that conditioning takes place? In school. In short, it's what we often do to our students that drives them toward a strategic or surface approach to their learning. Well, not what we do, it's all those other teachers, right? We're innocent. But here is my question. You may not have read the literature, but you've gone to school. You're involved in schooling. And what I want to get you to do is to do some speculation, even if you haven't read the research. My question is this: what are those conditions in schooling that are probably most responsible for fostering surface and strategic approaches to learning? I'd like for you to talk to each other, maybe in small groups of 3 or 4 or 2 or whatever is most convenient to you. And I'm going to wander around again and test my Spanish to get you to just speculate. What are those conditions in schooling that are probably most responsible? Okay? Have fun.